of things, right? So today, what we talking about? What if you never really had any bad friends, right? And I want y'all to sit with that for a second. What if you never really had bad friends? It probably sounds like, oh, a cliche, or, you're probably unable to process it, right? Because you experienced so much betrayal, or so many people that may have, harmed you emotionally, spiritually, or even physically to make you feel like, damn, I must have bad friends. You feel me? But so before I really get into the whole topic, because I want to unpack this with y'all by asking questions, but also giving a bit of my experience, but also what I've learned. I just want to talk through it, right? So I'm gonna give y'all a little story time. Story time. So basically, y'all know how men don't usually do things for their birthdays, right? At least most times, you would say. All right, back to it. Y'all know how men don't usually do things for their birthdays, right? Well, I'm gonna give y'all a story time from 3 years ago when I did. You know what I'm saying? It was my 18th birthday and my last birthday celebration with friends. Yeah, I'm 21, yeah. But yeah, it was my 18th birthday, my last birthday celebration with friends. And how to say, so I was just coming out of high school. My senior year, I just came out, and so now I'm home free, on my way to college. I'm like, all right, yeah, I kind of want to see all of y'all. Let's go out. Let's, go to Dave and Buster's for my birthday, because I didn't know what else, but I wanted people to have fun, but also eat. And I had a girlfriend at the time. I think life was pretty smooth. And let me just cut to, like, I guess the end of the story. I got cut off and blocked on everything by like two or three of my friends, people that I knew from high school. So them's high school friends. Not that I lost them in college, because like we just fell off. They literally blocked me on everything, right? 3 days after my birthday. I was like, I'm not gonna get into the details, but damn, I was like traumatized. Like, damn, y'all could have waited a week, like, but no, I was actually like distraught. I'm like, what's going on? But I was distraught in the terms of, I'm asking, what did I do? Or maybe, why were they such bad friends? Or how come I couldn't see that they were such bad friends? Or was I a bad friend? I was just cycling between the two. But then I kind of had to reflect and ask myself, who was I energetically anyway? Right? And when I asked that question, just for me personally, this is how it works for me personally, I remember that I was a people pleaser. I didn't really respect my time, space, and energy. And you know how they say you are the company you keep? That is the level of energy I was vibrating at. And I had people around me. Therefore, what were our bonds based in? Not to say just because you aren't your best self that the people around you will, betray you or anything like that. But who was I energetically to hold space for these people that I called friends? And therefore, when I was cut off, I held that for like 3 years. I always would tell people, yeah, they just blocked my birthday for no reason. I started to feel like I was a problem, or they was a problem, or, it just impacted how I interacted with friends in school. I couldn't trust myself. I couldn't trust myself in making connections because I was afraid. I held that on it. But what if I said that you never had any bad friends? They were just a reflection of who you were internally, right? So work with me, right? So to connect with the theme, I invite y'all to answer with me honestly. What if your current connections or your past and present connections were just reflections of your internal frequency, right? And it probably sounds like a bunch of woo woo. What are you saying? But when I say internal frequency, I don't view things as you have a high frequency, low frequency, middle frequency. Everyone's higher, lower. I don't view things like that. I view it more so as we vibrate at different, I wouldn't even say speeds, just at different points. It's almost like tuning into a radio station. They might have markers for which one is the best radio station, but you get a different vibe from every radio station. And each one has its own level of importance and connection to the collective consciousness, right? So if I said, what if all your connections were just reflections of your internal frequency? What would you say to that? Right? So now I kind of want to get into friendships within the human experience, right? I feel like a lot of times we aren't able to see things maybe outside of our human body, our material body, our flesh, right? Instead, we kind of see it as, this is that and this is that. Like, this is my friend, and therefore we should be friends forever. We should be friends for however amount of times, or just, we don't kind of understand that life is kind of a series of points, that we have people for certain periods, right? And friendships within that human experience, they're meant to help us understand how to connect with the real world. Think about your first friendship, maybe in first grade, second grade, third grade, your first friendship, right? Whenever that was, or even it could have been daycare, right? You kind of learned what was normal within a social context of where you were. Where were you at the time when you connected with most children? Camp, school, where else could you really have learned those interpersonal skills, is what you might call it, which is working with somebody, which is, you know, how do you really define friendship? You feel me? So friendships in the human experience, they often change and they often represent different things at different times, right? So now on to my next point, right? Even though that point is not fully finished, I want y'all to work with that too. But we romanticize being a victim of a bad friendship. Like, what if we just do that? What if we just somehow romanticize being a victim in a bad friendship? It's kind of easy to romanticize it in a way, to say, like, they were a bad friend to me. And of course, you might, have that little, oh, of course I was, a bad in some way, shape, or form, or I had some imperfections. But how much do we kind of own up to it? When I say romanticize, it's more so we don't acknowledge what we tolerated and what we didn't tolerate, right? So my next point was shifting blame from them, no, from us to them, shifting blame from us to them, right? So we don't really acknowledge what we tolerated and what we accepted as normal, in terms of when your friend comes around and asks you for something, or when they're venting to you, or when they're talking to you, and how much your energy is maybe being drained, or how much things may not be reciprocated, or just how often you have to kind of dim your light to fit into those spaces, right? We don't acknowledge how often we were a bad friend to ourselves in a type of way by kind of associating with these people. We don't realize that there is a larger space, there's a larger energy, there's a larger environment, right? We find our friends mostly based on our environment, whatever school you went to. If you went to a different school in your middle school time, in your elementary school time, of course you would have a different friend. You would have a different best friend. You would have a different enemy. If you went to 3, 4 different schools, you would have different dynamics, right? But you went to one school, and therefore you have that kind of friendship, right? So think about what you tolerated, in terms of what I said earlier, which was, what was your internal frequency like? And I think a good part of thinking about what your internal frequency is like is knowing that you can change it. You have everything that you need within you to change it. Say that I read a book about All About Love. That's what everybody's reading, All About Love by Bell Hooks. If I read All About Love, I'm kind of like, okay, I know a little bit more about love. So somebody comes to me, some girl, she talking about this and a third, she love me. I'm gonna say, what's your definition of love? Meaning, if I read about friendships, if I listen to things about interpersonal relationships, if I listen to things about leadership, I'll kind of understand what is more fulfilling for me within these dynamics. But you don't know what you don't know, and you are your company in a type of way where you're bouncing off of these energies, right? If my friend succeeds, I succeed. If my friend does bad, maybe that is a mirror of what's going on in my life. What am I not doing? Therefore, you might try to help. You might try to help them. You might try to fix them. You might try to bring them up with you, because my friends are or how to say, I am my company. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I'm trying to bring them up, because if they're not coming up with me, what does that say about me? Am I a bad person? Am I selfish? Am I all of these things? You know what I'm saying? So you really have to find you first a lot of times. Another point that I wanted to make, my last point of the day, is that there's a psychology Google. If you do a Google search about how long do friendships last, right? They say it has a lifespan of 7 years. And some people might hear that and be devastated, because they're like, no, I had my best friend for 14 years or however long, or, I know my mom for how long, and we've been cool ever since. In anything, relationships, friendships, connections, you should always look at quality versus quantity, right? But let's work with this point, that friendships have a lifespan of 7 years. How realistic is that? If we think about elementary to middle school to high school, college to adult life, there are significant changes that go on within our bodies, but also within our personal circumstances, right? If I'm talking about elementary to middle school, I want you to think about it more so in your life. What changes did you have within your family dynamics? What changes did you have within yourself? Most people, they go through puberty from elementary to middle school. So that middle school to high school transition, it's a lot of different things that you're experiencing and learning about your body that you're just unsure of. And if I'm talking about my black community specifically, I don't know how many other communities it happens in, but sex is a taboo topic. Changes in your body are really taboo topics, and you really explore love through trial and error. Same thing with friendships. You explore it through trial and error. But with all these different dynamics, why would your friendships not change? Why would they not also evolve? Because you have different desires, different likes, different needs, different deficits of love that you might want to achieve through different realms. And we aren't growing in the same, that's why I said we're all vibrating at different frequencies. We aren't going to meet each other at the same pace every step of the way. Because if you was my friend from elementary, middle school, high school, college, we got a damn good friendship. But that's not the case a lot of times. And sometimes you hear people grow apart. And it's not necessarily because somebody has done something wrong. It's more so they have had a different path based on their blueprint that's, given from God, or even maybe they're on a current blueprint sent from their parents. I hear a lot of immigrant stories from a lot of my friends, and they're like, yeah, my mom, my dad said it's either I'm a doctor or a lawyer. I had more so freedom in my path in terms of what I could choose to do, who I could choose to love, and just who I could be around, what I could put in my mind in order to achieve what my soul came on this earth to do. So when we kind of look at the differences, therefore you might have different needs and wants. I also would have different needs and wants based on my agenda, based on my blueprint, based on my path. Anyways, I'm pretty sure y'all kind of understand where I'm going with this in terms of, obviously friendships don't last forever. Nothing is really forever in this lifetime. But if we talk about friendships, right? So yeah, I'm just kind of unpacking just small layers, right? So we talk about elementary to middle school to high school. There's also obviously so many intricate paths. Who's going to this college? Oh, what about my middle school friends? Also, this one has a boyfriend, this one has a girlfriend. What's going on? And because we're set in such a Western standard in terms of education, beauty, just the way of life, we kind of look at it as like a straight line in terms of, okay, I'm good in middle school, therefore I'm gonna get to a good high school. I'm good in high school, I'm gonna get to a good college. I get, once I'm good in college, or I make all these connections, I'll have a good job, and therefore I'll have a kid. No, sorry, I'll be married, have a kid, and then, happily ever after. But life is just not that straight in terms of there are a lot of in the middle points. And the reason why I say that is because in high school, that transition is, we don't really acknowledge the death of a lot of friendships that we have. And when I say death, it's death of the person that you used to be in middle school when things weren't as complicated. Maybe you didn't have, as much freedom. So now you're looking at the death of maybe your innocence in a type of way. In terms of my mom, she used to drive me to school every day from first grade to eighth grade. I never walked home. I never walked to school really. Ninth grade was such a big transition for me personally. And, it's normal for everybody, right? But we don't acknowledge the death of, I no longer have my mom to pick me up or take me here. Therefore, I'm kind of rearranging in my mind what love is in terms of, does my mom not love me because she doesn't pick me up, or because, she doesn't take me to school anymore? Because I'm not saying that's what love was for me, but there was different forms of love. Therefore, she would always say, have a good day and love you and stuff like that. Not that she didn't say it, but it's just a different setting that she said it in, right? So now I have to look at the death in it and how can I grow from it? So how can I acknowledge that change within myself? Because I remember feeling some angst because she was still dropping my siblings to school and just some things she wouldn't do for me anymore, right? So I'm also looking at it with my friendships. It's death of a person that I used to be within my friendships. Maybe we could go to class. Maybe we could go to the library together. We could go and eat something together. And it changes a lot. And because we aren't taught interpersonal relationships, interpersonal skills in relationships, how are we supposed to know how to connect here to here? You know what I'm saying? Okay, just because you go to school 5 miles away from me, how are we still able to adapt within our friendship when we only learned it within the realms of an 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade classroom, right? And then now if we're talking about high school to college, obviously we know what happens. Some people won't go to college. Some people do go to college. And when you do go, you might go local. You might go far out. For me, it was within my tri-state area. Some people go as far as California, as far as Maryland, as far as, wherever that it's not easily accessible. How does our relationship change then and there? And therefore, connecting back to the theme, What if you never really had any bad friends? It was just a vibration of your internal frequency, but as well as theirs. Not how valuable the friendship is, but more so, how well do I know how to navigate, these waters? So it's different realms to it, right? Different realms of how do I know how to navigate continuing this friendship, but also evolving in who I am in order to continue that friendship. So, yeah, just sit with that. It's a lot to really unpack with that. But I think what I mainly wanted to touch on was, for me, it was people pleasing. For me, it was giving more to somebody, more of my time, more of my energy to a detriment where it maybe wasn't reciprocated or maybe I just wasn't seen. But I also felt like I wasn't seen at home. So I tried to look for it obviously within my home dynamic, but definitely at school. And when I saw maybe I could achieve some of it, maybe I could achieve a smile, maybe I could achieve a laugh, or maybe my friend might save me some fruit snacks, something. I made a condition, I made a norm of chasing validation in a way. But we don't always see it like that. Like, nah, I just like to help out. I'm just giving. I'm just very sympathetic, or I'm an empath, right? But a lot of times things just they aren't that simple. So it's just about what frequency are you vibrating. That was my first question that I want to bring it back now because I'm about to go to my call to action, my last stage in this. But bringing it back, I invited y'all to just talk with me and say, what if all your friendships, all your connections were just reflections of your internal frequency, right? But yeah, I'm kind of losing, my point. But call to action, right? So within your personal spaces, just think about that. You can't hold love and grudges in the same pocket, right? If I think about I have a hand, right? And I can only have a certain amount of things in this hand. You can't hold love and grudge in it because they're both heavy things to carry in a type of way. And that's just a little poetic metaphor I want to give y'all. But they are heavy things to carry. So you can't hold love and grudges in the same pocket. So I would invite y'all to do a 1 page or even half a page, half a sentence really. Go in your notes, something. 1 page entry of what you knew of friendships before and what you know now. How have your values changed? Why have your values changed? Is it because of friendships? Is it because of your current work standard? Is it because of how you were loved as a child? What did you know as friendships and what do you know now? Kind of do like a little self-analysis, right? Because obviously we aren't perfect. I'm not perfect. No one in this world really is perfect, but there is beauty in acknowledging that, at smiling at it, at laughing at it. If we don't acknowledge that we aren't perfect, you kind of go about thinking everybody a bad friend, everybody a bad coworker, everybody a bad this, a bad everybody doing something to you. But what if things are happening for you in order for you to come back home to your soul, right? So another question not question, but another call to action is you could also do a reflection, just a little voice memo like I'm doing right now through YouTube, but also through podcasting, through a little voice memo, through writing, or just talking out loud. It's normal to talk out loud, but ask yourself, have you been a good friend to yourself? And when we talk about self-love and everything in this generation, right, we kind of just talk about it. Like, yes, I love myself. Yes, I'm a good friend to myself, but how exactly? Is it just getting yourself ice cream on a Friday? Is it just watching, your favorite TV show? How have you been a good friend to yourself? What vows have you kept? What vows have you broken? You know, it's important to be a good friend to yourself so that you know what a good friend looks like. If you get what I'm saying, how is anybody supposed to show you what is satisfying in a friendship, a family relationship, in an actual partnership? How is anybody supposed to show you what that looks like if you don't even know what it looks like for yourself? You might have examples as your family, as your moms, your dads, but do you have a personal example of what really makes you smile? What really makes you happy? What do you know? How do you know how to get back home? Right now, personally, if I'm using a metaphor, I can get back home using my GPS. Or once I know the surroundings, I can get back home. Do you know the surroundings of your soul? What makes you feel well? What makes you feel happy? So figure out that. And honestly, it could be anything. It could be watching your comfort show, but it could also be unpacking your comfort show with yourself. Sometimes your friend's not going to want to watch the same show with you. Well, write about it. Write about what it means to you. What does it mean to little you, the one inside you? What would it have meant to that 5-year-old you? So, call to action: have you been a good friend to yourself, and how can you do that every day? Of course, you can't go to the damn movies every day. You can't get ice cream for yourself every day. It's not healthy. It's not conducive. It's not gonna work for you. How can you do that internally? What small thing can you do to be a friend to yourself every day? I feel like you should even make that a habit. Put something in your notes. Have I been a good friend to myself? How can I do that? And maybe it might be, singing a song. It could be journaling. For me, it's journaling. For me, it's meditating. It could be maybe having a smoothie and doing a 1 minute meditation. It could be anything, but what is one intentional thing that you've done to be a good friend to yourself since you woke up in the morning? Don't wake up depending on somebody else to be a good friend to you. If I wake up and I'm like, damn, my best friend ain't text me good morning, I'm wilding. Like, I'm really on tweaked out. But if I wake up, I don't even touch my phone, and I'm just like, let me tell myself good morning. Let me tell 8-year-old me good morning, because that's the one that's calling out for, you know, my help, my holding. And my last call to action: how do you receive and give love in friendships? Of course, I think we've talked about this maybe in All About Love and Bell Hooks, but also just this is just it's not a uncommon thing to talk about, right? Which is, oh, do you know how to give love and receive love? But in friendships, platonically, but just in general, how do you receive and give love? For me, I knew how to give love in my friendships. I know how to, which was just my idea of love. Who said I'm loving them by maybe I might do their homework for them, or I might solve their problem for them, or I might listen to them and give them the answers, and maybe they don't take my advice, and instead they go back to the same person. That's what I thought was love. I thought it was holding space for them. I thought it was giving to a detriment of myself. But now I'm learning and I'm evolving. That is not what giving love in friendships has to look like. And it could be like in different formats, by just holding space for them to vent, to let that just be that. I hear you, I acknowledge you. How do you plan to change that? Kind of guide them back to themselves. Or maybe, I don't always hold space for just our conversations to be within that content. It doesn't have to be us venting. It doesn't have to be us doing things for each other, or it doesn't have to be one dynamic, right? How can I shift that? So, and also, how do you receive love in friendships? Do you even acknowledge when you are receiving love, or if you are receiving love? When things aren't reciprocated, or when you kind of assume that they have more problems than you, because maybe of your privilege, because of what you don't experience, but you still experience things on a micro scale, or maybe a mid micro scale, or maybe the same extent of them, but you feel like, no, they're having trouble, therefore I need to kind of shut myself down. How do you give love in friendships? How do you receive love in friendships? And that's my last call to action. I feel like once we kind of do a bit of a deep dive, like I'm trying to do right now within this podcast with y'all, within YouTube, when we do a bit of a deep dive, we kind of realize that to say that, sorry, let me get it back. When we do a deep dive, we kind of see that maybe we did not have any bad friends. They were just reflections of who we were internally. To say that they are bad friends is sometimes to say that they were bad people. And as we know, I think I've said this before, even though I only have 5 episodes out, the action is never the reason. Meaning, because they did something, maybe they betrayed me, that doesn't mean that they're a bad person. That doesn't mean they were a bad friend to me, per se. It was just what had happened. Of course, it's hard to be rational in the moment. Even a few months from now, it's hard. Even ever, it's hard to be rational and say, like, nah, but it's not nothing personal that they might have had with you. Maybe it's something personal that you have had within you, and they kind of manifested in that form to help you realize something about yourself. But yeah, that's the end of this episode, though. I really hoped y'all loved it. I really hoped y'all enjoyed it. Y'all got something from it, or if y'all got nothing from it, whatever it is. I thank you for inviting my voice into your space. You feel me? So church announcements for what I have coming out. Well, coming out, just what's going on right now. So I have an open mic that I'm doing right now in my school this coming Monday. I don't know the name of the open mic. I don't know if there is a name, but I know the name of my poem. It's If Johnny Had 5 Apples. I'm excited to do that poem. I talk about just growing up in a strict household, but also finding myself because I was disruptive at school. So I'm really excited I already memorized it, but excited to kind of express it into the world. So yeah, and my last announcement is that my album is out. Closure It's an album, it's an art project, it's an EP, it's whatever you want it to be, baby. You feel me? But yeah, it's out there. Listen, listen to it, stream it, or don't. Honestly, it's just really up to y'all. Really, I love y'all either way. Thank y'all for listening, and yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'm gonna end this with my outro, which is just be the change that you want to see. Live, laugh, love, all of the things, but just be the change that you want to see in this world. The only way to do that is to do the call to action, exist, do some introspection, and yeah, just enjoy life. Vibe out. Yeah, until then, take care.